Okay, welcome to our session on Power and the People, which is part of paper 2. 1 hour, like all 4 of your papers, it's 1 hour. This is paper 2 that you do with Edward. So both Power and the People and Edward will be on the table when you sit down. You've got an hour for Power and the People, you've got an hour for Edward. Take those hours. There could be a leeway of 5 minutes either way, but you've got an hour for Power and the People. 4 questions on this one, and you're dealing with 4 time periods. That's quite crucial, particularly on question 4. So we're looking at medieval, early modern, 18th and 19th century, and then 20th and 21st century. You've learned about different events within those 4 time periods. You've got to have information on all of those. Okay, so what do we do with these? Well, question 1 is a question about sources. It's going to ask you how useful a source is for a particular inquiry. We've taught you how to analyse sources. This is kind of your flow chart that you're going to go through at the point when you're analysing the source. You look at the source. What can you infer from the source to do with the inquiry? So as you read between the lines, what is this source telling you about the particular inquiry, the question? How does that then relate to what we history teachers have taught you over your 2 years? How does this relate to the context? And then you can ask yourself if it's accurate, and then decide, well, if it's accurate or if it's inaccurate, why might that be? And to answer that question, you're going to have to use the provenance, which is why it was produced, who produced it, and what kind of source it actually is. Is it a picture? Is it a painting by somebody that was commissioned to do it? Henry VIII might have commissioned a painting to make himself look particularly statesmanlike and king-like. Why did he do that? Okay, so you're looking at the purpose, the origin. That person who painted that was paid to paint it. So they're going to paint it in a certain way based on the reason that they were asked to do it. Okay, so that's the kind of flow chart. That's what you need to do once you encounter your source. Then you have to think about why it's useful. Bit of a warning first though. An unreliable or an inaccurate source is still useful. We've done this before, the Brexit bus. Let me remind you about the Brexit bus. This is an inaccurate, unreliable source. It's been proven to be fundamentally a lie. We don't give that 350 million as it stands to the EU every week, and what 350 million pounds could not therefore be given to the NHS. So it's unreliable, it's inaccurate, but it's still useful. It could be useful to show that the people who put that slogan together believe that the British people think that the NHS is really important. And that's why they chose the NHS, not education, not prisons, NHS. It's also useful because it shows the lengths that the Leave campaign were prepared to go to win. They were prepared to lie in order to win. Totally inaccurate, unreliable source, still useful for understanding the methods and the lengths that they were prepared to go to. So please always remember, when it's asking you what's useful, an unreliable source is really, really useful. In fact, sometimes more useful than one that is completely reliable. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're analysing this source. Then you need to start your answer with source A is useful because, and then give the statement as to why it's useful. Don't just repeat what kind of source it is, but tell us, please, why it's useful. So source A is useful because it shows Oliver Cromwell was a controversial leader. Or it's useful because it demonstrates that Henry VIII's use of imagery as propaganda to enforce his role as king and now head of the Church of England. So you're explaining straight away what it's useful for, and then use the content and the provenance to explain it. Okay. Now on to question 2. Question 2 asks you to explain the significance of one of the events. We know we're going to have learnt a number of events. I think it's going to be, I can't remember now, 12, 13 events. We need you to give, please, 2 GCSE paragraphs to explain the significance. So 2 ways in which it's significant. Is it significant in the short term? Is it significant because it was widespread, it affected a lot of people both in Britain and maybe even further, that's the bell. Doesn't mean it's the end of the lesson, I'm going to carry on. Is it important? You know, we've talked before, a cure for blisters is probably not quite as important as a cure for cancer. So how important was this event? What were the repercussions? Did it lead to other things? Maybe it failed in the short term, but in the long term, it survived, and that survival was in repercussions with other events, with inspiring others. Okay. So use swirl, please, to explain the significance to juicy P paragraphs. Okay, that's question 2. Question 3. You need to compare one event with another and explain how they're similar. That could be that they're similar in what caused them. It could be similar in that they use similar kinds of methods, peaceful or violent methods. It could be that they're similar in terms of the extent of the government response, that the government responded violently, or the government agreed with the demands and then went back on them. So find ways maybe in which the government response was similar. Are they similar in their outcomes? Do they both have long-term repercussions down the ages? And the impact, it could be in terms of the amount of change, the type of change, that kind of thing. They are your 5 ways that you need to look at the way that they're similar. Pick 2 of them, off you go. Okay, question 4. Question 4 is one of our PADGE type questions because it's a statement that you're asked how far you agree. So X was the main factor in maybe causing something or changing something. It's a 16-mark question. And for this one, give 3 P paragraphs, 3 juicy P paragraphs, and a judgment. So an overall, you agree or disagree. So to do that, briefly write a plan. Every one of these 16-mark questions, give yourself a very quick plan just to take out all the thoughts that are jumbling around in your head, put them down on paper. While I'm at it, you could answer question 4 before you answer questions 1, 2 and 3. Question 4 is worth 16 marks. So it may be, and SPAG, so it may be that it's worth really pushing to answer that one first, because you'd rather rush one of the later ones. So, quick plan, get the ideas down on paper. Then, why do you agree that X factor was the main cause? But then you've got to give reasons why maybe other factors were the main cause. So you have to include that, and then you must give a judgment. Here are the factors that you can be using. These are the factors, so war, ideology, maybe the government, the actions that the government took, way that they use communication, individuals themselves, or religion or economics. And we've given you before some really big graphs to sort of map out those trends. Go back to those, revise from those, but they are the factors that you're looking for. And then you've got to give reasons to agree or disagree. Crucially, absolutely crucially, I marked for this paper this year, and it was devastating really how many people could only get half marks because they only used events as examples from 1 or 2 time periods. Guys, you've got to go from medieval, early modern, 18th, 19th century and or 20th, 21st century. 3 of those time periods, you've got to pick events from those. If you don't, you're capped on what you can achieve, no matter how good your essay is. And that's just devastating for an examiner when we're marking it and seeing how hard someone's worked and then they've missed those marks. So 3 time periods, 3 juicy P paragraphs and a judgment. And if you can, try and link them together. So show how economics maybe links with war, or ideologies are then implemented by individuals. Okay, good luck with Power and the People. Remember, it's on the same one as Edward, but that's our session for Power and the People. Okay.